Make them legal, make us rich. To hear the White House tell it, we fix immigration, we fix this economy, and create millions of jobs, and suddenly this recovery is off to the races. Hadley, Heath says, more like off their rockers, joining Hadley and Michelle Fields and Steve Laser. So, Hadley, you're not buying this Nirvana argument. Why not?
Well, I think it's correct that more immigration increases the labor supply, and that's a good thing for our economy. That's a good thing for economic growth. But this issue of immigration does not operate in a vacuum. There are many other issues at work. And if we ultimately create more eligibility and expand eligibility for our very liberal entitlement state, that's not good for our economy. So there are different principles at work here.
Michelle, he's more or less saying here, and it's if you're going to pitch this, is a good way to pitch it. It's good for you. You benefit from this, so be for this. What do you think?
Well, look, one of the problems that we have right here in this country is Social Security. And the reason why is because the ratio of workers to retirees has fallen tremendously. In 1950, there were 16 workers for every one retiree. Now there's only 3 workers for every one retiree. And the reason why is because we have an aging population. We need young workers. Immigrants and undocumented immigrants tend to be from 18 to 35 years old, and they come here to work, not to live off of the state. And so I think we need to embrace them and say that, yeah, we actually need these people in order for programs like Social Security to work.
But you're assuming that that young population dwarfs the older population that would similarly tap those benefits.
Well, no. Look, if you allow them a probationary type status, they're not going to be able to receive benefits for years and years. We're talking maybe a decade. So to say that they're just coming here and they're just going to immediately sign up for food stamps is not true.
What do you make of this whole argument that it's an economic argument interest, Steve, for this to happen?
Well, I guess, first of all, I'm shocked I agree with Michelle, but I think she's absolutely right. You know, the numbers have been run on this. The Congressional Budget Office, nonpartisan, did some numbers on this. The immigration reform bill that exists in the Senate would increase revenue by $459 billion over 10 years.
How would they know when they couldn't even identify how many illegals we had?
Well, you know, everything's an estimate, you know. But
right,
they say that
you don't even know where they're working, how much they're making when they're working. But go ahead. It's the only numbers we have.
It's the only numbers we have. And it would increase benefits over those same 10 years by about $259 billion, but that leaves us about $200 billion extra in revenue. So I think this is a great thing for us. I mean, and what's the alternative? I mean, we either have to eventually give these folks a pathway to citizenship or send them home. We can't send them home. If we sent them home, it would collapse, for instance, the real estate market and other things. So we have to do one way or the other. I think this is the best choice in really what is not a good series of choices that we had before us. And both parties are at fault over the last 50 years. It's not a partisan issue.
Well, no, both parties have punted on this. But, Hadley, I'm wondering, aren't critics of this plan also worrying that it emboldens those who want to come here illegally, also get a pass, also be granted amnesty, also take advantage of a country that is willing to take all in and doesn't really want to deal with the hassle of kicking anybody out, so that it creates an even bigger problem? What do you make of that?
Well, I've seen so many studies that have to deal with the economic impact of immigration. And you're right, Neil, that one of the problems with these studies, although they reach dramatically different conclusions, is that they have to make assumptions about the types of workers who are coming here, how long they're going to stay, what their contribution may be, and how many of them may become eligible for state assistance. So the many, many variables make me cast some doubt on any study that I see about a 10-year or 20-year economic impact study. We
do know that many of the illegals here, Michelle, do work very hard. They're not sucking off the system because they can't. So we do know that the core that are here work their heinies off. Now, the fear is that by granting them amnesty or granting them a path to citizenship, whatever you want to call it, those who follow them might be less inclined to be as industrious. What do you make of that?
I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, that provides a perverse incentive. But the thing is we're not going to ship 11 million people back to their country. We need to do something, which is why we should have a probationary type status for them.
But do you think, Michelle, then by that definition that Republicans are shooting themselves in the foot or looking callous when they argue this, or does it hurt them? What?
Well, I think that, you know, a lot of the objections to immigration aren't necessarily objections to immigration per se, but objections to the entitlement state. So I feel like, you know, we hear a lot about compromise. Well, why don't Republicans say, hey, you Democrats, you want immigration reform? Well, look, we need to cut the entitlement state, and let's work together and find a compromise. There needs to be, we can't just give it all to them. We need to cut the entitlement state, because that is the problem here.
Well, I can barely do this thing. If you want to wed the two together, Steve, geez, I don't know. I mean, but anyway, where's this going?
Well, I think if Republicans want to work with Democrats, there's a sector of the Democratic Party that would like to work with them very much on preventing additional workers from coming here after this deal is done, and that's organized labor. I don't know how much Republicans would want to work with organized labor under any circumstances, but organized labor is worried that this will cause more undocumented immigrants to come here if a deal is struck.
But wouldn't they sign them up?
No. So, I mean, you know, this is a situation where they're worried about the labor market getting so large that wages would fall. So they're very much interested in not having an additional wave of undocumented to come after this deal is done.
But real quickly, guys, do you think we're going to get immigration reform this year? What do you think?
I do not think so.
Michelle?
I don't think so.
Hadley?
No.
All right, on that bright note.